Hello, this is your boy Feltouch here, and welcome back to another episode of the Manchester City Blue Monday podcast. Thank you all for joining me once again, and you can probably tell from my voice already how frustrated I am after the result against Arsenal yesterday. So, I've been moaning about it, but eventually when it came to it, I was incredibly nervous before this big kick-off, and I had every right to be, judged on the end result and how disappointed I was. So after Chelsea's victory on Saturday, and I think they pretty much deserved that, although the performance was pretty terrible in the game, they're very, very clinical in front of goal, and if you can beat Spurs, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve to win any match, because I think they're probably the contenders to win the Premier League next season. But after such a good performance from Chelsea, I was already a little bit worried, and it also made me question as to whether we would be able to win the tournament even if we did beat Arsenal. But then when it came to the day, the excitement builds, you get ready, and perhaps you're just hoping that there's a big Wembley trip at the end of the season, something to keep excited for, something to always keep you on your toes until the end of the season, but nonetheless it just didn't happen for us. So at the start of the game, we put out a fairly decent side as far as I was concerned. I thought we looked like a pretty decent sell. Yes, Bravo was in goal, which you're never too sure about, but in all fairness to him, I felt he had a pretty good performance overall yesterday. But apart from that, I don't really know what you could have changed about the team. The bench was looking fairly weak. There wasn't all too much strength in depth. You could have argued that that Sterling should have perhaps started over De Bruyne, maybe, I don't know. But eventually he came on after about 15-20 minutes anyway, after a horrible challenge from Gabriel. And he really should have been booked for that, and that was the start of many, many poor refereeing decisions. So David Silva got injured from that. Wasn't booked Gabriel, and then as a result of that, he went off the pitch after about 15-20 minutes, and you lose perhaps your star man already. It looked like a bit of a knock just to his ankle sort of thing. I'm not really all too sure what happened in that, but apparently according to reports, both him and Sergio Aguero are hopefully available to play on Thursday's big derby. And then, of course, there was the biggest moment of contention in the first half, which was the disallowed goal. We also should have had a penalty before that, which was a pretty poor challenge, and Sergio Aguero went down. And, of course, the shocking decision from the referee. They decided to not give the decision from the penalty, and we probably could have taken the lead. I'm not saying that we would have scored the penalty, but after a very, very short amount of time, we could have taken the lead early on in the game. Then followed that up with some very, very poor line-owing to see that the ball had gone out. I mean, whenever I've spoken to referees or done any referee training, the advantage has always gone with the attacker, but of course it seems like that gets forgotten in the Premier League. And after a week of shocking Premier League and also world refereeing decisions, I mean, the profession isn't in a great shape at the moment. On Saturday I watched Hull City's game. Umar Niasse got sent off for a challenge, which was a definite yellow card. Following that, of course, was the Rangers game on Sunday. I watched that. Andy Halliday didn't get sent off for an absolutely horrific challenge. Then there was the City game, and then later on in the day there was the Barcelona-Real Madrid game, and Spanish referees, I mean, there were so many offside decisions which weren't offsides, and then of course Casemiro probably should have been sent off for a second yellow as well. And then eventually they did get the Ramos decision right in that fixture to send him off, but nonetheless the rest of the fixtures, I mean, there's been some very, very poor refereeing decisions all around this weekend. But then it came to our game, and of course, as per usual, we're the team which is the victim of yet another very, very poor refereeing decision. The ball from Sané very clearly did not cross the line. I understand it's a very difficult position to be in, but in all fairness, as I said, the advantage should go with the attacker, and we should have got ourselves an early first half goal, and I think that really would have changed the complexion of the game. We could have pushed on for a second goal in the second half, gone out in the second half with full of confidence, but instead what happened was we go out in the second half as a result, and we scored a counter-attacking goal, and immediately after that we were on the back foot again. And what can I say about Arsenal's goal? You know, fair enough, it was a goal from a very, very nice ball into the box, and although Jesus Navas, who's playing right back at the moment, I mean, he's not the best right back in the world. I think every single person in the world will accept that, but he's also a winger at the end of the day, and I can't expect him to be tracking that. You could perhaps say that it should be Kevin De Bruyne, or one of the other midfielders should be at the far post there tracking Monreal's run, but they didn't, and unfortunately Arsenal got by themselves back in the game. We could have had a penalty later on after Yaya Toure was clipped as well in the box, and he seems absolutely furious after that decision. I mean, he was clipped very, very obviously. I know the ball was a little bit in front of him, but still, it's still a trip in the box, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a second penalty. Arsenal fans, if you're watching this, you'll probably be thinking, well, how about Alexis Sanchez in the first half? Well, if you watch that again, he's pulling Jesus Navas' shirt first of all, so as far as I'm concerned, it's a 50-50 in that they're both as bad as each other. Just let play on, because that's what the referee decided to do, and he actually made the right decision with that one eventuality. And then when it came to extra time, the goal which Arsenal scored, it was incredibly scrappy, and you know, things just don't really go our way in this fixture. We hit the bar before normal time, Yaya Toure hit the post after a fantastic save from Cech, and then wouldn't you know, they just score an incredibly scrappy goal from a free kick, which in my honest opinion wasn't a free kick. I thought that was just great defending from Vincent Kompany. Obviously the referee took the opposite decision and decided to give a free kick, and they go ahead and score from it. And towards the end of the game, perhaps the substitutions were wrong in the fixture from Guardiola, but because you can make 4 substitutions after extra time in total, I think it was perhaps justified. I know Sergio Aguero was injured, and a few other players looked knackered as well on the pitch. I mean, people might say, well, why didn't you bring on Kelechi and Nacho sooner? But then when he did come on, he didn't exactly play well at all. So he hasn't played that well all too much recently. I understand he hasn't had very many minutes at all, so it's difficult for him to adapt to big fixtures like this. But nonetheless, when he did come on, he didn't exactly impress from that. I mean, but the whole game, we just didn't seem to have any luck, and I think that's been the story of our season in total. I mean, there's games where refereeing decisions haven't gone our way, against Chelsea, against Arsenal the other week, and there's just so many which really haven't really ever at all worked in our favour during the whole course of the season. And it builds up, and it costs us really over the year. And as much as people say, well, Guardiola should have done better, he spent X and Y amount of money in the summer, it's his team now. I don't think he really understood how big the problem was at Manchester City, perhaps defensively, and I don't think he really helps himself. As he said himself, he doesn't coach tackling, but even still, I think defensively we have been at fault for a number of times this season, and even when we did take the lead against Arsenal, I never really felt as though we were ever going to just keep a clean sheet in the fixture, because we just don't really seem to ever do it. But apart from the result, I mean, we've had no luck at all this year, and we're going into the end of the season, we're not going to win a trophy. It's nigh on impossible, and it's incredibly frustrating really, because we have spent money, and you do have huge expectations when perhaps the biggest managerial name in the world walks into the club at the start of the year. You're hoping perhaps something better, but at the end of the day, I think everybody's disappointed. Whether it's the manager's fault, I don't know. Whether it's the player's fault, perhaps, but also luck and refereeing decisions have massively gone against us this season and have cost us in so many important games. Now, if you asked me a couple of weeks ago, perhaps a couple of years ago, would I be against video technology being introduced to football? And I would have said yes. I'm pretty much against it for many reasons at the time, because I felt like it would take a long time. I think it would remove perhaps many of the exciting things about football, and I think that humans should perhaps be running the game at the time. And I also think that football is a much more complex sport than many other games, such as cricket, for example, where it's a very, very definitive reason when somebody is out, for example, where video technology is used in that game. For example, the third umpire will be used, perhaps if someone nicks the ball in cricket, you'll be able to use Snicko, be able to see whether with Hawkeye he's actually clipped the ball, you're able to hear whether he's clipped the ball, you're able to see the predicted bounce of the ball and things like that, which you probably won't be needed in football. Also, there is a lot more interpretation of the rules in football as well. Certain things people might say, well, I don't think that's a penalty, whereas other people will. Who's going to decide eventually? Will the technology decide? I mean, there's got to be a lot more clarification in football from my perspective if technology is to work, and it's been trialled recently in the Club World Cup finals, I think it was, and it seemed to work pretty well in that sort of tournament, so perhaps in the future we could see it being introduced. And I think after this season, human error has let down our club in particular so many times that eventually I think that technology will have to be brought in football, despite some reservations and difficulties at the moment currently in the sport. But the only positive from the weekend really was that Liverpool lost, and that means from our personal perspective it helps us out. They've played 2 games more than us so far this season, but are 2 points ahead of us. But we've got some big games coming up, especially the game against United. They're also on 32 games played, and they're only 1 point behind us after a good weekend win against Burnley. But does that now mean that Liverpool could miss out on the top 4? I don't know. Will it be us? Will it be United? but our poor form at the moment would perhaps rule us out from the top 4. Certain times I just think, do we have the bottle to really go on this season and go on and definitely claim top 4? I don't know. At the moment, an opportunity has been presented to us. I mean, this is the only thing we have to play for this season, and we do really need to get into the top 4 as far as I'm concerned in order for us to progress next season and attract the biggest names in football if we are to progress as a football club. I mean, in terms of our fixtures we've got left, we've got Middlesbrough away, but luckily we've got 3 home games against Crystal Palace, against Leicester and against West Brom, with Watford last game of the season who really don't have all too much to play for. Out of all those teams, I think Crystal Palace could perhaps be a very tough fixture. Middlesbrough this weekend could be as well, but then again we've also got the Manchester derby as well, and you never know what's going to happen in those games. Now, after the result against Arsenal, of course, we picked up a few injuries, and it does look like perhaps David Silva could be returning, as well as Sergio Aguero. There's also questions about whether John Stones will be returning, but I don't know whether Bakary Sagna's fit yet. And also, on top of that, Gabriel Jesus, who was deemed not fit enough to even be on the bench at the weekend. So he could perhaps feature against United. I suspect he probably won't, maybe coming off the bench at best. On top of that, there's also a question as to whether Vincent Kompany will play, but it's such a big fixture that I hope that he will, because otherwise I think we're going to struggle. Even though United have so many injuries, I think we're lucky in a way, the fact that they have Ibrahimovic out, and also they have Rojo out, they've got Jones out, he's been pretty good for them so far this season, and Juan Mata as well. There's a lot of players in their side, which I haven't mentioned, which are currently injured for them at the moment, but still, they've still got a very strong squad, they've got lots of quality players in their side, and it means that Marcus Rashford is pretty much likely to start against us, probably perhaps Martial after starting on Sunday as well, and they're both very quick players, and we struggled against pace that lots of times so far this season. It'll be a very tough game, there's always so much passion, and in derbies you never really ever know what's going to happen in terms of the result, especially with our poor home form at times this season as well. So, in terms of the derby game, what will I predict? I have no clue. But all I want to see is all the players coming into the game with a good attitude, wanting to win, battling for every single ball, waiting, not messing up. I mean, showing a bit of passion and drive. And I know the fact that we've been dropped out of the FA Cup now, we haven't got all too much to play for, but the boys really need to be up for this game if they really want to get anything out of it at the end of the season, because this game really is a 6-pointer in terms of getting into the top 4, and I know Manchester United are looking likely to perhaps win the Europa League this season, but even still, if they can finish in the top 4, it sort of releases the pressure of having to go out and win the Europa League. So there you go. On top of that, we've also got the Middlesbrough game at the weekend, and they're not exactly in the best of shape themselves. I mean, they're in pretty dire straits at the moment. They're very far down at the bottom. 24 points. I mean, they're well behind Hull on 33. I mean, it's going to be incredibly tough for them to stay up. They really need to get 4 wins out of 5 for them to stay up in well, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to come up after that. On top of that, they've got a couple of bad things at the moment. I watched their game against Bournemouth. They got Gaston Ramirez sent off, and I don't think their attitude's great. But we beat them in the FA Cup not too long ago, and we showed pretty good performance in that. On top of that, they've also got a little bit to fight for. It could be perhaps their last meaningful game in the Premier League, depending on other results during the week. We'll have to see how they get on, but I still think they'll be up for it, especially after they drew against us earlier on in the year in the Premier League. They'll want to end this season as well as they potentially can, even if they are already pretty much down by that time anyway. But there you go. I predict that hopefully we'll come out this week a lot happier than currently I'm feeling right now, hopefully. If we can win against United and win against Middlesbrough, perhaps my spirits will be lifted a little bit more higher than they currently are at the moment. You can probably tell I'm genuinely so dejected. I was really hoping that we could finish this season with a trip down to Wembley, but poor refereeing decisions, perhaps some poor defensive decisions ourselves as well, and at the end of the day, I'm left disappointed like so many of you other Blues out there. And if I have to read more stuff on Twitter, reactionary bollocks like get Guardiola out, he's a fraud, look how much money he's spent, look at the players and all this other rubbish. I mean, at the moment, we genuinely don't have any problems. You just have to get some sort of footballing perspective. You look at clubs like Leyton Orient, Coventry City, Blackpool, and you just have to think, look, where we were perhaps 10 years ago, playing under Stuart Pearce, there was 1 year where we didn't score at home for 6 months, and I just think of those times and think, yeah, If you told me 10 years ago we'd be getting to the FA Cup semi-final and losing to Arsenal 2-1 after taking some extra time, I'd be absolutely delighted. But that just shows how times have changed, and I think we do have to remember as City fans to stay humble and always acknowledge where you came from. And as soon as you start forgetting that, we'll become another Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, one of those clubs which just band on about history instead of really forgetting where we used to be. And I think that's what's special about Manchester City Football Club. We remember the dark times, and hopefully we can put that into terms of our performances as well. Look on ourselves on a bit of perspective as well, and just think, you know what, it could always be worse. There you go. Thank you very much for listening this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much once again. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe. Check out the links in the description below. I'll read a virtue.